Back home, and as I mentioned at the start of the program, the next parliament looks likely to have 43 female MPs out of 150 members. The Liberal National Coalition is likely to have just 13 women out of their 76. And my sources within the party who I've spoken with this morning have said they've done the math on this and they believe it is a 20-year low for the coalition. The party's actually going backwards, not forwards. My colleague Paul Murray had something to say about this issue on his program, Paul Murray Live, last night. Have a look.
We have a problem in this country. If the blokes at the front of the ship say they want to do something about female representation, but they lead political parties that this year, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, this year, that when 7 women retired and 6 of the 7 were replaced by blokes chosen by the major parties, and the governing party has only 4 female voices representing Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane, we have a problem. One that can't be covered up with words, one that needs to be changed by deeds. And I don't believe in a world of merit that there are only 4 women in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane who are good enough to represent the Liberal Party.
Now, Tony Abbott was slammed, of course, for only having 1 female member of the Cabinet, but his former Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin, has been very outspoken when it comes to the need to get more women in the pipeline for promotions, especially within the Liberal Party. This is some of what she had to say on that program about this issue last night.
If we want to appeal to a growing number of people, particularly young people, we've got to look like the rest of the community. And our policies can be antiquated because they're only influenced by a handful of women. And then when you go to pick a cabinet or a ministry, you're left with very, very few women to choose from. So you'll have women who are only very new to the parliament being thrown into junior ministerial positions with a lot of sort of antagonism from their male colleagues who perhaps have been in there longer in order to lift your numbers. And it's a real problem.
Let's look at this issue a little closer now. Joining us here in the Melbourne studio is Amy Mullins. She's the Executive Director of the Women's Leadership Institute Australia. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in. Also from our Sydney studio, we have the journalist Angela Priestley, who's the publisher of Women's Agenda. Good afternoon to both of you. Angela, let's start with you. When you looked at these numbers and broken them down as I have this morning, what was your reaction? I mean, I can't even believe that we're talking about this in 2016 to this level.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe it either. And I think Paul Murray really hit it on the head there when he said that talking about the different cities and the lack of female representation we have in different cities, and the fact that only we're set to have only 13 women in the governing party, it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this is that it does bring up this idea around the quota system, which obviously the Labor Party has had for some time now, and how, you know, the Labor Party has done a lot better than the coalition in terms of the number of women they've been able to put forward. I think they look set to have around 28 women in their party of around 69 seats. So they are well ahead of the coalition there.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people get their heckles up when you even mention the quota word. It's a concept that, look, feminists are divided about the concept of whether quotas actually work and whether they are necessary. We hear a lot about the need to promote on merit and include on merit, and that one argument is that women are actually put backwards by introducing quotas because they seem to be there on a token sort of basis. What's your view of that, Amy Mullins, and what does the research tell us about quotas?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We just had research come out yesterday which showed that quotas do work in politics and in parliaments across the world. There was a longitudinal study done by the Centre for Ethical Leadership at the University of Melbourne, which basically showed that if you had an aspirational target that didn't have any mechanism behind the target to actually achieve the goal, any kind of party backing and strategies in place, then no one really got anywhere. But when people had quotas in, so that can either be a hard target, which had no penalties for non-compliance, but it did have strategies in place behind it to ensure that there were women ready and waiting to be pre-selected for the party machine to then put them through and actually ensure that they are pre-selected and then getting into Parliament. Those kind of things work, as well as quotas where there are penalties.
So do you think the major parties are taking this seriously as a problem?
Well, not really. If you look at their actions, they're not. We hear it every year and every time there's an election that merit is important, and it absolutely is. But you've really got to ask yourself, which merit system is this? Who designed what merit is, and who is it for? You know, we really have to question whether we are getting a meritocratic outcome, just like Paul Murray said, because really, if you look at the talent in this country, there's absolutely plenty of eminently qualified women who could step up, and certainly women that I now see who are stepping up or have expressed an absolute desire to make change in the country.
And that's another argument we hear often, and Angela, I'm keen for your view on this, is, well, yes, there are many women who maybe are qualified for these positions, but is the interest actually there? I know that you come into contact with a lot of very intelligent, very ambitious women through your line of work. Is there a desire, do you think, for women to actually shift away and go into the public sphere, or is there something about our political world that just inherently turns women off?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that is an issue, definitely, that there is possibly something that might be turning women off, and I don't think we have to look very far to see what that might be. We've seen some of our female politicians just go through absolutely awful experiences, and I think it can turn some people off. And again, we look to research for this type of thing, and there was a YWCA study that looked at how young people thought about careers in politics following Julia Gillard's experience as Prime Minister. So I think it can potentially turn some people off, but I don't think it's turning off enough women that is seriously affecting the numbers. I think our old-fashioned ideas of what of merit are still coming into play, and the fact that people are getting pre-selected because of who they know rather than what they know.
And Angela, is it a cop-out, do you think, when people say, oh, well, the confidence gap is to blame, the imposter syndrome is to blame, the onus really should be on women to step up and put themselves forward more? Yeah,
I definitely do think it is a cop-out, exactly. We do see pieces of research around confidence levels, but nothing really absolutely factual that says that women are any less confident than men. I mean, I do think the experience of others can affect our views in the line of work and what we want to do. I do think that we need to see other people in certain fields and particularly in leadership positions to believe that we too can achieve that. I don't think it's fair to say that, that women don't have the confidence to go into politics. Absolutely not. I come across extremely confident women all the time, and often more confident than the men I come across as well.
Amy Mullins, is this something that is just a problem with the Parliament here in Australia, or is it just more really a representation of how Australian society is? We know there's a big problem when it comes to women in boards as well. Is politics worse, though?
I think it is worse because it really does have a very strict pipeline, and it does have a certain level of hoops that women and men need to go through before they actually achieve the certain milestones in their career, and also then reaching ministries in the cabinet. So I think it is definitely prevalent across society. I think the culture in politics is more cutthroat than in most other kind of areas anyway, and that does require women to actually be, to behave in a more assertive manner. But when they are behaving in an assertive manner, they can often get backlash, and they realise that when they're performing contrary to their stereotype of being nurturing or collaborative, they often do get this kind of negative response from others. And so that's often the reason why women appear less confident, is because they don't want to enter those scenarios where they know they're going to have that negative response and backlash. So I think I have seen, certainly, and we have seen through our Pathways to Politics program for women, which we started up at the Melbourne School of Government, we have women in there who have expressed an absolute desire and passion for politics. They want to run for office in federal, state and local levels, and we had just such an amazing response that it really does really hearten everything for me to know that there are women from all political ideologies and spectrums, from the Liberals, from Labor, Greens, Independent, who really absolutely want to get in there and have a go and absolutely take part and make sure that they are making decisions for our country. Because if you don't have men and women making those decisions, you're not going to get the best outcomes.
And so, from your perspective, quotas aside, is it more focus needed on nurturing that sort of desire, I guess, at a grassroots level?
I think it's nurturing the desire that's already there and making sure that those women who are passionate about it they don't fall off the train, they stick with it, and that they actually are supported by the party machine and the mechanisms behind it and the factions and the leaders. It's really about making sure that the culture in politics is inclusive of everyone. And I think that's the key issue, is that when you're in a hostile environment or an environment where you're in the minority, that certainly means that people are less likely to, put their time and effort into something where there isn't an absolutely clear payoff that A, they will get pre-selected, and that B, they will then get elected and actually have some kind of future in politics. So, there is that trend already and bias towards men, and we really need to have leaders in our political parties, like Bill Shorten has done, to step up and say, we have women in this country are 50% of the population, if not more. We need to have them represented in our party and in our parliament, and I will take action to make sure that that occurs. And that's the kind of thing which the Liberal Party could do without instituting quotas, but they need to have a discussion about targets, because what gets measured gets done. And if you're not measuring it, it won't happen. And it's the same for a business with any KPI. If you don't set a target, you're not measuring, your progress towards that target, you're not going to reach it. So I think that this is a chance for the parties to actually look at what is best practice at the moment in this whole area, and then actually start taking some action.
Just finally and briefly, Ashleigh, because we do have to move on, but how significant was it for you to have Malcolm Turnbull stand up during the campaign and label him a feminist when some of the senior women within the Liberal Party aren't really willing to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was significant, but, you have to... Actions speak a lot louder than words. So I think there are a lot of issues and a lot of things that we'd like to see Malcolm Turnbull address to show that he is the feminist that he claims to be. And I have to say, it is still disappointing that we can't have more women standing up and saying that they are feminists, that there is something that they don't like in terms of associating with the word, especially when it comes to our Minister for Women particularly.
Yeah, Angela Priestley and Amy Mullins, thank you so much for your insights. We do appreciate it. We hope you don't get bombarded by some of the social media harassment that we all know about too well whenever these sort of discussions come up in the public sphere. Do stay with us. After the break, we will look at all of today's sporting news. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute.